sir.
All right.
We just have to make sure we're up on it.
All right. Sorry.
Hopefully that cold weather. Then you'll catch cold.
Allergies. Eyes are burning. Concentrated. Ready to go? All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here today. I would like to welcome those watching on Facebook Live and on our other social media outlets. I'm here today to address two areas of concern and police responsibility that unfortunately have been rife with misconduct and corruption within the department. That's our Narcotics Enforcement Unit and towing. I've said it many times that the community deserves transparency and policing excellence, and it's my hopes that these announcements today will lead to that. After 2 years of an active investigation, I am pleased to announce the conclusion of Operation Clean Sweep Task Force. I would like to also thank former Chief James Craig for his vision to create the task force to root out what has been reoccurring issues within the Narcotics and Major Violations Unit. I would also like to thank our investigative partners who have spent numerous hours assisting in this process in the thorough investigation. That's the FBI, the Michigan State Police, the Michigan Attorney General's Office. I'd also want to thank the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office for assisting in obtaining search warrants, reviewing misconduct for potential criminality. In summary, we found numerous incidents of misconduct that our Director of Professional Standards, Chris Graveling, will outline shortly. I want to emphasize that not all DPD members assigned to major violators over the past 10 years were engaged in this misconduct. Again, not all of the members assigned to major violators over the past 10 years were engaged in this misconduct. In fact, the opposite is true. The investigation found that it was a direct and distinct group of individual officers who were committing this misconduct. As Chief Craig has previously reported, several of those members have resigned or retired during the pendency of this investigation. Finally, it is important to recognize that we have taken the necessary steps to root out misconduct. Chris Graveling will go into that in greater detail, and to ensure that going forward that this type of misconduct is unlikely to occur. We will and have been implementing a number of protocols to ensure that we're auditing the certain areas that have come up in this investigation, and that we've had a change of leadership in the narcotics section. Before I bring Chris Graveling up, I do want to introduce a number of people that are involved in this investigation, and also that is involved in the next investigation that we'll be talking about. So I'll start with First Assistant Chief.
First Assistant Chief Todd Bettison, Office of Support Operations, Community Outreach.
Director Christopher Graveling, Professional Standards and Constitutional Policing.
Commander Michael Parrish, Chief of Staff. I was the towing monitor for several years. Currently the lead on towing matters.
Lieutenant Dietrich Lieber. I worked as the officer in charge of the Operation Clean Sweep, currently assigned to risk management.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, Director Graveling.
Good afternoon. Today, Operation Clean Sweep is coming to an end, and what we have found during our 2-year-long investigation is specific areas of misconduct within the major violator section, both in the accomplishment of their job as law enforcement officers, as well as administrative misconduct as well. And so as Chief Craig has mentioned before, we found areas of concern in overtime fraud, in forgery, false affidavits, and even perjury in this matter. Based upon those investigative results, 4 sergeants have retired, 2 corporals have retired, and 2 police officers have retired 4 other police officers resigned, bringing a total of 12 police officers leaving the Detroit Police Department as part of this investigation. We've also submitted warrant packages to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Specifically, we have submitted 9 different criminal warrant packages covering 8 different officers. We are in the process with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office of evaluating those warrant submissions, and we continue to send information to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office on those. Specifically, the conduct in question there is both overtime fraud, primarily some court time fraud, and 1 case of perjury. Now, in our findings, we've also found some administrative or departmental shortcomings as well, to include inadequate overall supervision, lack of follow-up in not in custody warrant submissions, and poor case filing systems. We have already begun to take positive steps to clean up our own processes to ensure that that does not happen again. Specifically, all search warrant affidavits for the major violator section now must go to a deputy chief prior to going to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office for their review. Major violators unit also requires a member of the rank of lieutenant or above at every narcotics raid throughout the city. The practice of releasing or flipping felony drug offenders has ceased at the major violators unit. While working overtime now, major violators members must do a body-worn camera introduction, state what their purpose is, and also on and off-duty times. All overtime is now managed digitally, and so managers immediately have information on a daily basis of who is working overtime. All MVU surveillance notes are now digitally stored and part of the RMS system. Arrest warrant status of each offender is now digitally tracked as well. And organized crime now has 3 lieutenants assigned, where they only had 1 before, to increase supervision within organized crime and the major violators unit. With that, I hand it back to Chief White.
Thank you, Chris. So it's our hopes that with these reforms, as well as a robust auditing process, we can bring this investigation to a conclusion and not have a repeat of what we have seen, which caused the investigation to be initiated. I'm going to transition over to another area of concern since I've been back with the department, and even before I left, that we have taken on, and that is towing reform. You will all remember that back in August, Mayor Duggan tasked me in reviewing the city's current towing practices and processes and to propose some reforms. After extensive review, we have looked at a number of different practices. We've looked at other agencies that have a similar model around the country, and no other tow unit operates exactly the same around the country, and certainly ours is not unique to that. But in doing so, we found a few opportunities to make a number of improvements to our processes, and this was also informed candidly by some of the information that we've learned through the course of a number of investigations, some of the indictments information that have been released. We tried to build in our reforms processes that would make it very difficult, if not entirely impossible, but I won't say anything's impossible, but very, very difficult for anyone to repeat some of the behavior we've seen. We've identified really 4 key areas that we have to focus on as we go forward. One is the procurement of a specialized tow management software. Number 2 is the procurement of towing services utilizing standard city practices. Very important. Before, you all will remember, there was a tow permitting process that did not follow the city's already established procurement process. Currently in place is that permitting process, but we are moving very quickly to move the tours into a procurement bidding process. Increase accountability through the implementation of a code enforcement unit. This will be a civilian oversight code enforcement unit. And many cities have that. And what they do is they go out and ensure that the practices and the policies are being followed, the rules are being followed. We will have an investigative arm to that process, so if violations are found, that there will be an opportunity to come in and coordinate an investigative arm and an investigative process with the police department. But the responsibility of that will be this code enforcement unit, which is a non-sworn investigative unit that will have the authority to ensure that the contracted tours are complying with the rules and that the citizens are being serviced appropriately and effectively. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the procurement process, but in addition to the procurement process, is a citizens towing app. And that is something that we're looking to do. We put out an RFI, or I'm sorry, a request for information by vendors, where we will have a request out to build an app so the citizen will have the ability to download the app on their phone. If they are requesting a tow, they will know on the front end who's coming, how much the costs are, so there's no intervening or intervention by any person or persons to change who the tower is or who's going to come out and handle the towing of the vehicle. But most importantly for us is that there won't be any change in costs, and you will know on the front end exactly where your car is going and who you are contracting with. The city will also hire a contractor to provide this tow management software for vehicles ordered impounded by us, the police department. That's important, that we have the same transparent process, because as you know, the police department has a tow operation, and it's important that we follow the same processes as the privately contracted tows. The system will track key information on vehicles from the time of the vehicle is being towed, which is important, through the time that the vehicle is released. And that'll allow us to audit the fees associated with it. This automated process will be used to distribute towing opportunities. Very important finding in these investigations. This is where a number of misconduct incidents occurred, and that is in the selection process and the distribution process. And what this automated system will do, much like when you call an Uber, the Uber or Lyft will be selected, pre-selected, sent to you. If that one can't make it, then the system will select another tower to come out and service. And it could be a number of reasons. That tower could have a problem with the tow vehicle, the tower could have gotten another tow, but we want the system to automatically and have that system be automated where we can audit it. Because one of the things that I've tasked the tow manager to do is to audit processes, to see what happened on a day in and day out basis. Well, this audit function will happen automatically. That report will be submitted to the tow monitor. That report will be submitted to my office for review. That report will be submitted to the Board of Police Commissioners, and that report will also be submitted to the Code Enforcement Unit so that they can look at any irregularities. And again, this will help guard against anyone who is steering tows towards certain companies. There should be a clear and concise process that shows who's getting tows, what time they're getting tows, and why they're being selected for tows. Each tow company will be required to provide reports on the distribution of tows. As I indicated, the costs associated with tows, we'll be looking to see if there's any irregularities with that. And those key metrics will help us to ensure transparency for our community. We're also building in a module to help anyone who can't afford to get their vehicle back for any number of reasons. Certainly, people who have been victimized by crime and their vehicle is being held for evidence, we don't see the reason why they should be charged again or charged a fee if they're a victim of crime to get their vehicle back. And we're working through that right now. We also are building a hardship process into the towing where there'll be an opportunity for the community to appeal to a panel, perhaps the Code Enforcement Unit, to talk through why they can't afford to get their vehicle out. It could be for any number of reasons, but this hardship opportunity will at least provide an opportunity for a citizen who's having problems getting their vehicle out to talk it through. And we're hopeful that will at least alleviate some problems that we've noticed in looking at this process that some citizens are having. You know, it's really interesting how this process goes. A number of citizens have had their cars impounded so long that they can't afford the tow fees to get the vehicles out. And that's something that we're looking to correct as much as we possibly can. Obviously, we're not going to be able to fix every problem that we run into, but the ones that give us the most concern certainly are those people who have been victimized by crime, and we, the police department, or a tow company is holding their vehicle for evidence so we can do an investigation, and then there are tow fees associated with that. Those we're looking to waive immediately. Also, the important piece with this is the Office of Contracts and Procurement to have a contract for the towers, and I can't state that enough. That is a very important piece. This is a tried and tested process that the city operates with every contractor, where you will have the opportunity to open and competitively bid as a tower to engage as a tower with the city of Detroit, and that process will be managed by OCP and not the police department. I am very happy to announce today that we have selected a vendor for the towing software. I signed that contract. I sent it to the Office of Procurement. They're evaluating that process now and that contract, and hopefully that will be going over to City Council very soon. And that's really the biggest piece of this 4 points, right? You got to start with the most impactful piece of this, and that's the transparency piece, that's the auditing piece, and that's to ensure that there's a forward-facing module for our community that has to engage in towings, to have the opportunity to take control with their phones or their computers to know who they're going to be engaged with, who they're going to be interacting with, and hopefully that will permanently resolve some of the issues that we found in these investigations. So with that, I will take any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
Can you approach the podium, announce your agency and
Good afternoon, Chief. Jim Kurtzner with Channel 7. To follow up, when you say there's going to be a procurement and competitive bid process, does that mean you're starting over with all the towing companies, or those who have contracts, those will continue? What does that mean exactly?
Yes, so we've already opened it up for bids, and that happened actually prior to my arrival back in the police department. But going forward, what I'm speaking of is anyone who wants to be a tower will have to participate in an open and competitive bid process. I'm going to bring Commander Parrish up to talk about the selection process for the towers that were on permits that have been allowed to already participate in the open and competitive bid process before I return to the department. Commander Parrish.
And sir, could you tell us your full name again, please, for ID purposes?
Yes, Commander Michael Parrish, Chief of Staff. So as the chief indicated, the permit system was the predecessor. That is the current system by way of which the towers were originally selected. We are still utilizing those towers that were selected via the permit process. However, we are transitioning to contracts. Contracts is the norm. Contracts is how vendors are typically selected via a contracting process. So a RFP, which delineated clear standards, was put on the street. Everybody was given an opportunity to bid, respond to that RFP, and seek a contract with the city. That process is ongoing. Submissions are still being reviewed. Concerns are being investigated and will be addressed. And we hope to have contracts properly vetted in front of City Council after the new year.
Are there 16 contract or towing companies, vendors right now in the city?
There are currently 16 towing companies operating in the city.
Will those eventually all be, the permits will be dissolved and they'll all be under a new contract? Is that the eventual end result here? And if so, what's the timetable to get there?
Again, so everybody, including the 16 towers that currently tow for the city, were given an opportunity to submit a response to the RFP. We cannot guarantee that we will have 16 towers once the process is played out. We hope to have the process completed in front of City Council after the new year.
but they will have to transition. They can't just say, well, I have a permit, so I'm grandfathered in.
No, absolutely not. The permits are over, the permit system is over, and we are going to contracts.
And can you articulate for us what difference that will make? How do you, and it seems like when you look at these criminal cases, there have been bribes paid. We've had guilty pleas, so I'm not talking in the abstract, but we've had bribes paid, bribes accepted, whether it's cash, cars, services, or whatever. How will the contract improve that? How will that make any difference?
It's not necessarily the contract, it's the process that leads up to the formation of the contract. So just like any contract that we enter into, prior to entering into that contract, a selection committee is formed. Well, first it all begins with the RFP. An RFP is published, standards are made clear on the front end, everybody is given an opportunity to bid. That process is overseen by a department other than the DPD, by a department that specializes in the procurement. A selection committee must be formed. People involved in that selection committee must disclose any potential conflicts. It's a committee, so one person, merely one person, cannot steer it one way or the other. It's people with knowledge of procurements. It's a very sterile environment, which means lobbyists and other individuals that may try to influence the committee are not welcome. And the committee must make findings based on objective criteria that can be explained, not on mere impulse, and certainly not based on any friendships. So it's that very sterile process that ultimately goes to the Office of Contracts and Procurement. It's ultimately signed off by a procurement director. It goes before City Council. So it's conducted in a very transparent and normalized fashion. And what we want to get away from is the former process, the permit process, which was very unlike anything that we had, that any method the city used for procuring services.
I have a follow-up question. I don't know if it's for you, Chief of Staff, or the police chief. I think the count is now, with the most recent indictments, 6 DPD former officers and command staff, management staff have been indicted. Some have pled guilty, but the count is now 6. 2 city council members have pleaded guilty and resigned. 2 have been raided and implicated but not yet charged. Is that the accurate numbers at this point? And then once I've established that, I have a follow-up question.
There's been a number of people. I don't have the actual list of numbers with me.
Okay.
But I think what you've indicated, just from memory, sounds accurate.
And so what's your comment to the community? I know you've addressed this in the past, but what's your comment to the community of how deep this ran and how deep this corruption was?
Yeah.
And now you're tasked with fixing it.
Yes. So, this has been an ongoing problem in the city, in the department for many, many years. The department, the city, the community deserves a transparent process. And, some of the things that have happened are inexcusable. Those responsible are being held accountable. Those who, have been charged will get their day in court. This is something that has certainly, been a challenge, but we're up for the challenge. And I'm committed to making sure that we have a transparent process. I'm excited about this software because this takes the human element out of it. It's audible or auditable. And as Commander Parrish has indicated, when we looked at these processes, much of what we came up with, this whole reform package is informed by some of the misdeeds and the misconduct that we found. So this is really eliminating opportunity. The community, I thank them for their patience. They're frustrated. Our officers are frustrated. We've got good police officers, men and women, the overwhelming majority out here day in and day out doing fantastic work. And I don't get to stand here and tell you about that. I get to tell you about towing again. And so, they want it to stop too, because they want to celebrate the fantastic work and life-saving work that they do on a day in and day out basis, yet when I step up here, I'm not always talking about that. So we're committed. This command team is committed. I'm not making excuses. I'm going to make changes. And these are the first part of those major changes. That type of conduct is unacceptable. And if it's a member of this police department, it's my job to ensure that's not the case. As I keep saying, and I will say it again, wearing a badge is not a right, it's a privilege. And to engage in the privilege of wearing this badge, you must conduct yourself with the utmost respect, character, and certainly understanding that if we erode our reputation with this community, it'll be almost impossible to get it back. So we're going to work very hard to ensure that we respect what the community expects of us, and we're held to a higher standard. I'll get off my soapbox, but that's where I'm at with it. Accountability, transparency, and this represents the first piece of that.
Just one more quick follow-up. Was this an investigation that the feds had the ability to do with all of their techniques that could not have been done in-house in DPD?
Well, let me say this. We have, the feds, as you say, the federal partners have been fantastic partners. They have been transparent partners with us, and they've taken us along for the ride of their investigations, but we've had some incidents that we've turned over or shared with them. And I'm happy to have been a part of that partnership, and I'm going to continue to be a part of those partnerships because at the end of the day, the bottom line is not who's driving the investigations, but to remove corruption from the city and from the police department.
Hi, my name is Christine McDonald. I'm a reporter at the Free Press, and I had a question on the narcotics investigation, just a couple of detail. So you had 4 sergeants, 2 corporals, and 2 officers resigned, and then 4 additional resignations. You had a 12 total, but the math wasn't working.
Director, you want to come back up and clarify your numbers?
So the original 8 those people retired under
Okay.
charges or pending this investigation. Then the other 4 resigned. So the distinction that we were making there were those initial 8 had enough time in service to retire from the Detroit Police Department. The other 4 resigned prior to having sufficient time to retire.
Okay, so am I doing the math wrong then? 8, that would be 12. Okay, sorry. And then, so is it fair to say 8, you're talking about 8 warrant officers related to a warrant submission, so 8 potential additional officers could face charges?
No, those people are inclusive of resignations and retirements as
Okay.
well.
But separately, 8 additional officers that have not been charged to date could potentially face charges related to the narcotics?
Yes, so
Okay.
we have submitted to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office warrant submissions that include 8 officers. There are 9 warrant submissions in total, but it includes 8 officers. And so the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office is currently reviewing those warrant submissions and have yet to make the decisions. They've asked that we submit some additional information, and we're working with them in order to facilitate their evaluation.
And who would be the one for 9 then? Is that a?
So part of the overtime fraud, we submitted for each individual officer individually a warrant submission, but then we also submitted a conspiracy to commit embezzlement based upon all 5 individuals together. So that would be the additional warrant submission.
Okay, but total of 8 officers, it's not?
That's
not-
correct.
Yeah, okay. And then, of the reforms that you mentioned for narcotics, what is the biggest, reform that you feel like will tackle what some of the issues were that you talked about, like having lieutenants, I think, at drug raids, or some of the other, what are the bigger,
Oh, sure.
Accountability, management, supervision, and accountability.
Yeah.
Having lieutenants at every raid to ensure that the raids are following our practices and policies, and if there's any irregularities, an immediate response. Having the deputy chiefs engaged in search warrants and understanding that they have to sign off on them. And then auditing, inspecting what you expect and making sure that the people in the field are doing what they're supposed to do. Again, overwhelming majority, they do that. But the auditing process will ensure that those who have not have a legitimate reason for not following the practices. And there may be a reason why something went different than it's supposed to, but that needs to be documented.
Okay, and then finally, the cost of the software-related towing that you're submitted to council, do you know what the,
I do. Do you know the number off the top of your head? We can, let me,
Okay.
yeah, let's get that. I don't have the actual number. I'm going to give you a bad number.
John Hewitt, Chief, WWJ. Just two quick ones. When it comes to, and appreciating it's a federal investigation, when it comes to the towing, to your knowledge, is that still active? Could there be additional charges? I mean, do you know where that investigation sits despite all the changes you're announcing today?
Well, obviously, I can't speak to the federal investigations. So it wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak on that. I'm updating you as to where we are right now with towing reform. But
Still open?
It's still open.
Okay. And the other is in regard to those that were allowed retirement in regard to the Operation Clean Sweep. Can you clarify at all, I'm assuming some may be involved in these warrant submissions, not allowed to retire with benefits, et cetera. I mean, what could be the repercussions here?
Yeah, so that would be beyond my authority. I mean, if they've served the city and they're entitled to a retirement and they have not been charged at the time that they choose to retire, they're eligible for their retirement. And so now future charges, it's my understanding that there's some legislation regarding being entitled to your pension if you commit certain misconduct. We haven't engaged that at this point, but right now, speaking to your question, we didn't allow them to retire. Those who chose to retire, retired.
So forgive me. So in plain speak or layperson's parlance, if they are found to have done something inappropriate legally and are charged, convicted, they're still allowed their retirement and pensions just because they retired ahead of being charged?
So currently, that's the case. Currently, that's the case, yes.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
Good afternoon, Chief. Eli Newman, WDET. Concerning Operation Clean Sweep, so we had, I think, a number of these resignations and retirements announced last October. So I was just wondering if there was anything that had substantially changed between October's announcement of 2020 versus now, and then also just looking at what the total number of the collective overtime fraud that the department calculated in terms that was erroneously, paid out to these people.
I'll bring the Director of Professional Standards up to give you the numbers again. With regards to what has changed, as you are aware, I took office in June, and in my review of the investigation, the fact that the report has been concluded. It is in the review stages now. We're confident that we've rooted out the problems and that we can move forward. So today's announcement is the conclusion of Operation Clean Sweep. The Director can come up and provide you the numbers on the other charges.
So in terms of one officer, we calculate approximately $16,000 worth of fraud based upon court appearances. The grand total on the overtime, this occurred during the spring and summer of 2019. We approximate that to be somewhere around $10,000 to $12,000 as well.
Sure, and just to be clear, the time where these alleged crimes had committed was relegated to summer of 2019?
No, the one sergeant with the court time overtime fraud of $16,000, that occurred over a several year time period, approximately 2016 through 2018. And then the overtime fraud occurred primarily in the spring and summer of 2019.
Sure, and just to be clear, there haven't been any more officers from the narcotics unit that have been implicated in this scheme since last fall?
Since last fall, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. All right. Thank you, everyone.